Ha Gianvedach e cria I arhua na halapa. Laf skriving ga je skriven dat je corrid mile blianna.
Manuscripts early féimil gain sgascail gís gain mar ba bethe economsin agus coic a bhean na cuachcan economsin sa scíide.
Anichtje mar een jaar big edachgal en jenis skriftje is trehe je Gaelic na halapa.
Har ook alle guur am gefenken le me hulen in.
People care so deeply and so much about this text.
Chan leor seo mar eisimpleir agus fiúnis go bhfuil Gaelic ar a bhíann agus chofatar as cuideach.
Shen leor jed. Ha histe hu kaartje en jage Gaelic skrivig if adde lochliachtri a violachke fat lientjen.
It's looking good, everybody.
An de Davile fichit se ga is een leor gehaspenig an een operain is an hier doed. Ha archaeologen het hoosige de nummerste sma haast.
There are at least 5 buildings just in this little area here.
Tor Larach en leor is foskelig in Giavedach a ham choorsteed.
It's a posthole, and at the moment it's like, well, what is going to be at the bottom of it? Who knows?
En wil Larach wannig en jeed, a ga je schalig a jon lientjen tasje aan zijn nachtshow.
I mean, obviously, I hope we found the monastery. Wouldn't that be so exciting? Book coming back, I just think it would be so lovely to have that all come together.
Oh my goodness, look at this. Wow.
You get a feeling in your bones, it's like a sixth sense.
Well, it's 2 big stones next to each other, so hopefully.
I think it's here, but that's just me. I do think it's here.
I mean, could you believe if we're sitting here this time next year and we found it? That would be unbelievable.
Seo liefdach je leor jeed. Vertjen is skrivien is kutrumige aan een jachter in a halapa. Id is skrive gans een jichiv lien leor pochgast je hoskil en latjanja han. A gins je skialach hier se kriest. Wil kinnelichen je vannig van naamsjen het eerst in een leor jule. Jeshal is aan een levig de gunille, nou is een knoasige gesalach la heen. Ach zijn ruta afakel in jaarsjo gesorretje is skriven gaichudisch aan zijn bjarnen baan. Is adden duljaken, kierten vliandigen, a schöne soskel en toesel, weer in skrivig. Vachlen Gaelic, ik hiet je in jen George, het Martin, van een laadju.
Han leor cutrumach in féin aine ag na Gael chanin agus goharí stocha na Gael an snear hua, or hagi sin goró Gaelic sa scíre agus chofatar as cuideach san daie go bhlín. Ha sin deoch go cutrumach na Gael agus ha sin deoch go mas ánach temas menachig.
Ha leor jeed i de geleeg aan een boeltj ag leorlan Olhai Cambridge. Estoudig Davile deichit sega, schulie keet hiet miele toer go op rein. Was ge een laatje voor een willer en doel, a ga een nochtigen priesel Gaelic show beschrijvig.
So I first saw the Book of Dheir before I actually started my PhD. I think I was in the final year of my undergraduate, and I knew that there was this book, and I knew that, you know, the addenda in it came from the northeast of Scotland, and that was pretty much the summary of my understanding. And I went to see it, and it was embarrassing because it's just like, it's like falling in love. And you're sitting there and you're looking at this thing and you're like, God, this small book should not have such an aura and such a presence, and yet it does, and it is so important.
I mean, going to Cambridge to see it was amazing. The lady who showed us, you know, let us get really close to it, take photos with it. I have photos of me
with it. But it was fantastic to see such beautiful, beautiful little object.
Chula mis main, am zeker is gas gyfel mahir fi bri main, son blin ich sin hanil some big tor scholar in klein main. Sa chul hakin China operain, fat blin ich in a rash is gal gachasen.
Hanil is go kinj kaartje en jach na soskelen van jeche vlien is skrivig, en dan nalappe no edin. Ach, a fisco kinj gunjach na notigen Gaelic chudish an sa darnelien jiak an the skidadish an ganner jade an the buching, 3 mile tour id Balla O'Brien. Ach a toedis die of skial id Larach vanaching for an ra a Gaelic id skrivig an san lior bekidachgal.
Vi geferch ging mas onlichtje ma be seo Larach far an jachan leor skribig, leor geir skribig. Or se atje haun far an beutig du tul agus cantin kienchoch seo far an jach skribig, seo far an rona notigen Gaelic skribig is trai has an jolachir, as go person te gosse lish gevel tulach viacum fat vlinking rash a hanekas an skide, le Gaelic, vi ge sonlichtje kutamach gosse gas gestoch gero tulach acum va furoch an sinna knam hayosum, a has an joch ferking mas onlichtje kujoch.
An de Davílis seachtie cosich archaeologists scrútige nachi seo die tochte Aberdeenshire, a chaistege an zijn 3 vlien jiak, bliandigen is joi aum a vanaching. Get nach de Larach uit de vanaching, Larach uit koren briefwoord waar himmichel in nog gevlien. De goetige wien en buin tukkelig is an lehetje Larach. Van gloch in de studie lis een archaeologie Ali Cameron.
So in 2017 we found a few post holes that, I thought they looked as though they were in an ark, but it was difficult to tell. And one of those gave us this early medieval date of the late 7th to early 8th century. But we had quite a lot of evidence over the whole site of early medieval activity. So we wanted to extend out and obviously see if there was more of this.
Goed blian as Joishen is a alieth chiligle planne is een kloch fatten a smoa. Haar een dochus with voorslugging in je non a ge sho Larach vanach en jeed for een ro lor jeed.
Oh, it's incredibly important if we found it. Once in a lifetime really chance to get a look at an early medieval monastery.
It would be really lovely to find the monastery. Could you believe if we're sitting here, this time next year and we found it? That would be unbelievable.
Geplin Davíle fichit siga, is le run torna små die skrutig, ha injol traum, is ver idvelike majolach, chien, is teichgehorska algi.
Morning.
Morning, good morning.
Robbie is immer treinschig in a gloch gali, had een blionneken.
Okay, I'll start for that and I'll give you a fairly wide trench that way.
Brilliant.
And then we can start the day for the way you want to do.
Excellent, good, great.
As long as you know want to get to the pub.
Oh, not open yet. So a trench is a hole that we dig in the ground. So archaeologists want to look at some structure or area and they want to see the different layers in it. So they dig a trench with straight sides normally, so you can see how the layers are built up in the area, and then within the bottom of the trench the features that you find obviously are recorded in an archaeological way.
Archaeologists van nuur oorke, ach kamoringali ach missie en het jegadide gefatte voor.
We're still going to have to do hand digging at the bottom, quite a lot of it. So where there's been raised areas of stonework, we don't want to disturb those. So we're going to take it to within as close as possible.
Ach en jylle fattig is een wil roetig in het lachge adde cooperigen, Jan agus Jacob.
So Jacob's just going to look at those stones. So I'm just going to let them see what that is. Okay. Great, thanks Robbie, great.
sé dúil an mór a hand an skippe jalach dhéanamh itar na gútaige bhí na archaeologists dhá sprúliach a gútaige bhí cruneacha had imelín.
Often things in archaeology are not clear-cut and are often disturbed by later activities at the site. So you're getting a lot of different finds from different eras all mixed up together. That is quite challenging sometimes to unpick all that.
De háid sprúliach van napé Johnson láachig a cha I hoca líntsin as joy manach an yéad.
So do you think that's actually a feature, Jan, the stone? On the excitement scale, where are you?
Oh,
Scale, 1 to 10. You make the scale up. Oh, right. Oh, that's good. Okay.
En je nach da de hietje van hoosig uit de kloog, is hij kollig gewillen skippen het groen glachende Larach, a gutige wie maar faars je hokelach.
Yeah, you've definitely got something coming up there, haven't you? That, yeah.
Is gehinchnach, a gutige wie na starran, ha kieten na jagen mieltjen jevli on the hinneguge.
Unfortunately, we need to go back a couple of metres here. But at this level, you know, not at that level. So, you know, not as deep, that much above there. Because the path is meandering slightly, and it's meandered over here, so it's not gone straight across the field, because of course it was joining 2 points, but we don't know what those 2 points were. So we're hoping to be able to work that out. And as you say, exciting because it's people moving from one place to another. Absolutely.
Achem wil show torst ali kalnes aske I de vanach in Larach.
So we obviously don't know a lot about monasteries in this period. Not many have been excavated, but the sorts of things we'd be looking for, we'd obviously be looking for a church of some sort, and a graveyard, probably associated with that church. We'd be looking for something like a ditch, so maybe a big ditch which ran round the whole monastic complex, maybe other ditches inside. And then we'd be looking for obviously structures like domestic areas, industrial areas, so and in those industrial areas you might find evidence of leather working, vellum working, metal working. So there's quite a few things that, you know, would be able to say yes, that's more likely to be the monastery if we found those on the dig. But sometimes I think it's better not to be too optimistic, shall we say. But then it almost might backfire on you. I just think that it's not a scientific thing in any way at all. It's just me, and so sometimes I play it down a little, you know, and then when we find something, you get very excited. But yeah, you know, I'm pleased. Let's say I'm pleased with this.
Ha Gaelic an the leor yéad is skrivig an the Shaw Gaelic. Smarshen can je le farste hukshin in Loch Laverst in Lanju. Ha kalt lu ek ganen the Gaelic na hedum. En ganen a vek en soskil at Chiestal in the column Killia. Bei Colm Killia is school Christiach id Fiagalappe, va Vian and Chachgulin, a Stuyga hin Tashanya Edin, agus Apach Hudevaun lid Ilan for Costinier na Halappe. Agus a rare inscrivige Gaelic bei Colm Killia is Steig, Manachin Ye.
We can see that happening in the Gaelic notes written into the Book of Dheir. In the foundation legend, in the first note that appears in the Book of Dheir, it's Columba and his pupil Drostan who found the monastery.
Ha nochte a giesigen gre fer Drostan a van a skolad e Colm Killia, a chaich with a skjún vanachin. Ach shen a skrivian Gaelic eg baun na duleke hanas yuntach bulach.
It's a little story, and it says that when Columba goes away, leaving Drostan there, Drostand cries because he's sad at Columba leaving, and that's how the place name Dheir, or Deer now, comes, is because it's the Gaelic word for tears.
Cha mor ein gan inolun ach clch a horsti dyrst go either. Ha fém is skipper Jilch Coprach yn lavan a chud yn sas, gus an archaeologist Larach jarabig in shog ad idaf Larach a vanaching. U forstanach a colasan gewil guljar gunje sur halach and lahed.
So, good morning and welcome to the Book of Deer Dig. This is what it's all about. The book, the earliest Gaelic, and the monastery that we're looking for in these trenches.
Leabhar gen leor begidach gal gambrosnachug, ha surhalich had een biog lachig le skialach na manachin, it chin void fjugen duhil.
We get a really wide range, obviously of ages and of experiences, and a number of them, quite a lot of them who have been, volunteer with us, have been volunteering for a long time with me.
So I'm getting my master's in museum studies right now, and I've always been interested in archaeology, but there aren't a lot of opportunities to just get involved as a community member in the States. So when I heard about the opportunity, I just took it.
You get hypnotized by the soil.
Get ha voor goed oud ha kuch maar alles, ik wil more an eolish.
I started out with Ali as a volunteer before I started my studies, and so it's great to see people develop and progress like that, but it's also wonderful to see people who've been digging with Ali for 15, 20 years.
Ach ha names seke huletunje, na ha fallichtje van Jeronshaw, uilshachu. Ach anil na ha de shidig faris de Larach.
When we think of medieval monasteries, we tend to think of later medieval monasteries where they have a big Gothic church and they have cloisters, and it's a very core site, and we visit the ruins and we understand how they organised everything. But the really interesting facet of early Christian monastic settlements is that they don't have these big stone landmark structures, and very often what we understand as a monastic settlement can be quite a widespread complex, and within the settlement that they consider to be the monastery there could be more than one church, there could be more than one chapel, there could be more than one burial ground, there could be areas dedicated to craft working and areas dedicated to growing food and keeping animals. So we can't just target the church and the cloisters because they didn't have them, and they're almost like sprawling cities. So any bit of archaeology will come together to tell the story of the entire site.
Archaeology is a little bit like a cake. So you have your multiple layers, and the whole idea is that instead of eating it like a normal person would eat a cake, you eat it layer by layer. And the reason why we do that is because we have a thing called context, and we want to make sure that everything we find is in its associated context.
Agus jetamach gym fagat yn gohexo sio slan, gus fagadamach yn villen stuhul Larach ad van taun mahat de shidig, shen bicken is mile plionadash.
Leave everything in situ unless it pops out. If it pops out, have a look at what it is. If you want to ask anyone, ask myself, Jacob, Jan or Ali. So basically, unfortunately, that's a lovely looking stone right now, but CJ can't take it out because that would ruin our context, so she has to dig around.
Obviously, the people are really welcoming, or I wouldn't be here. Pretty amazing opportunity.
Shepria amas cloch archaeologisch, vi klarig flanichen minetjach, jikach either gen chloch, as if at the rooske gadash, menid ven.
So obviously digging is destroying. So this layer has been uncovered to allow us to photograph and plan it, and therefore make a full record of it. And that allows us then to start taking those stones off.
And that's a string line. This is at 1 to 10. So then it's just a question of measuring along to the string.
We're looking at, hundreds of years of occupation, and so there maybe is a mixed use of the area. It doesn't have to be one thing.
Oh, that's a lovely flint blade.
Yeah.
It's just in that compact surface there.
Just carry on holding it there for a second, because that's a beautiful angle. Look at the
Is that
working
all
on that.
Ach an yl yn byd sio bunting na si fanachyn.
No,
No, it's early. So, yeah, so it's probably about 8,000 years ago, something like that.
But up here, this is a blade. This is actually the tool just with the tip broken off, and then they mount it on wood or antler or make it into a tool. You know, they obviously were catching animals, cutting them all up, but that's worked on both sides. You know, so it's sharp still.
Oh yeah.
So lovely.
Is a cwtschen had the Larach gemaanasach.
Lovely gentleman on the end found his first archaeological find, and Jan has immediately poo-pooed it and said worm concretions or something.
It is, absolutely. What happens is that a root grows down, and then water goes down the root, and it forms iron on the outside. They're called ferruginous concretions, which is iron, concretions of iron, obviously, down a root. So that's quite a big route down. But no, I agree with Jan that that's what it is. So, I mean, archaeology is a bit like being a detective, that you're collecting evidence, getting little pieces and putting it together, you know, like a jigsaw with lots of pieces missing, and then you're gradually getting a few more pieces, and we're always trying to solve a puzzle.
De Larach yn had the Larach as oer, femi is skippe a hullet dat de heerlijk at heen, as jay yn glach kook brionnadash, a Larach of the East. Maar een kakel seo a Larach Jan.
It's the thing that we left last time. Excavated July 2017.
Hiel gwyl ygge van chakel seo le cawn la my fian yn darna agos yn treslin diog. A na cyn la seo torstisteach yn dachwch yn lapech agos y fanachyn, mar sy'n gwyde gre am y fanachyn y fawn.
I mean, obviously, I hope we found the monastery. I mean, wouldn't that be so exciting to sort of all coincide with the book coming back and this huge community project and the cultural programme too? I just think it would be so lovely to have that all come together. Obviously, that's not the way that archaeology works all the time, but maybe this time, we'll see. It'll be one of those things, a bit like love, you'll know it when you see it.
Ach yn e Larach clach ied I hiad jahiorse a could solace in the naam tuintjese jajachtrin halappe. Kiet mile in yearith jade ha balapik posh machalamek it of sher rosh.
Se virgin a clui and no an clug is aske ed mar a hair vitachers ek jade se na hacher ek Port Mahomet agus special clui and mode a becken vlinkin rash of a quite son rioch na crinich to make on yet who na halappe.
Port Mahomet is a Pictish monastic settlement. We know that the Picts had early Christian settlements that were monasteries.
Va Cecily Spall as kiln and glach on the posh machalamek va yedig na nugatin. Hoek shalig ingenach it behen and grunjach sin giavlin. Ach be sho kuchach toshach lin dorocha an an yachtrin na halappe.
It's an interesting period in Scottish history because all of these old power structures break down and it takes time for the new ones to build up. And it's very, very poorly understood archaeologically and it's really badly documented as well. So we have this sort of true dark age. We understand much more about the Picts now than perhaps we do about 9th and 10th and 11th century Scotland. So there's a gap between the Picts and the beginning of, you know, the Scottish monarchy. The Book of Dheir belongs to this period when, you know, the Pictish power structures have failed and then the Gaelic-speaking church people come in and again it's all about new power structures forming.
A lior ye the dúnig of yarn seo agus a could solace in the news gorocha seo.
This is a year of Scotland's stories, and for me, poems are stories.
And we had a
Gus féil chuid an leor a Chile gan jarhua, chai grún haspanin na chuid dói, va a chruchaín gu barstach na misk.
I don't know what it is about that little book, but it's to me it's even more precious than some of the more huge illuminated manuscripts that are more famous and more well known, like the Book of Kells. I mean, they are stunning, but the idea that this little book was annotated here and was here at some time and being used as a prayer book and slipped into a monk's habit because of its smallness, for me it's that link to ordinary people's history.
An geall seo cúteach gyd mach menama mór an gúnis an skíide a bhrosnachu.
Because I am obsessed with monks on mountains and islands, I have come somewhere with neither to think about mountains and islands without distraction. The world beyond...
One of the professors, Professor David Wheatley at the university, had been reading in the press about the book's return and just felt that he would like to write a poem about that and kindly gift it to us.
My heed is full of monks of the headlands and islands. Say I've settled in an earth, it is neither.
And because I think language is really important, so we decided to have it put into other languages as well, to link the past, the Latin and the Gaelic marginalia, to link that to the present.
Ersciebam semper, et quando, et ubi, verba scripta misella, ab calamo meo, verba vera...
Gan lurgan mihu, va fissicum, cún agus cacha a chumas scriben, ma fiaun, faklan, nad chluish. Thank you very much.
I think it appeals to ordinary people because it is a story from ordinary folk. It's not famous people. It's not people who were recorded in history for any real reason. It's local land grants that are in the marginalia, which would have total relevance to people in the northeast.
Sin na gráichan ferrin seo a torscaín fianis gadíadh gundeach na nuachtaichin seo is scríbh an seo an dhibhin jarhua na halapa. A cúntas ag bawn na duleice seo iad mar a chai pís talafin an an pit fuair fascid cean fátric a horstan joclais. Herá, hu gartneit agus níon gilevíchel an bawl dóin an an pit fuair de chríast, agus de cholam cilia, agus de grostan.
It's so cheeky. It's land grants as an addenda in a book. That's fantastic. What a great idea.
Agus han dulik seo fiús a clárig ferrin rá cahal e torsteachad cúdam don vanachin is an ciad neach gach nolaig agus cáisk. Ach go sonna var a clach ag láf scríbin nuv leid seo gus cláran mar seo chumal.
They record the land grants, and because you're putting them in a sacred text, that gives them a particular authority. You bring in the political heft of the founding saint, in the case of Dheir, this is Columba, to give it authority to that landholding. Because if you ever take those lands, you're picking a fight with the authority of that saint, and that saint has the power to come and punish you if you try and steal from them.
An hútar is seo fiús I liatacha chun an rúi héin. Ha nócht is seach gyda nimol y cwyd yn leor an an lafan gaifí a hyn na halapa y gian na manachin fa hísin agus eile. He scríbte an lachin iad an duleag seo. Y gaifí rúi na halapin y gúne ma ula bianach glíf. Ha fys acw gyfil cléir héir gyfiad y sŵrw fog ach siedefis nioch leirachal agus irotasan mi emachi. Ach na scutan mich i bwlach le fi torst immerig idd yn rwy y farialig ag yn awn, ha nócht seo y córach gynjach na fachgil Gaelic seo ysgrifig tra awn sy darna lín diog.
Then David I appears himself, and the seventh note talks about the very book itself. So you can place it, and you can imagine it being shown to David I. He's looked at it and said, okay, those notes do record these land grants. So it has an extraordinary character that it was at that meeting. David I may even have held it, but he looked at it and then he makes this announcement and it's written into the book. And it's the fact you can trace all of that that makes it so special.
Gyda ha fachge Gaelics na lavan scrivi yn volín sin idash, ha tast cumasach tiction yn Jew. Ach hennas dyda archaeologists a horsbio, et orsgain jalaf in mar eva behe kolach yn sio a hiwn mile blionna. Ach ha ali yn dochus gyn cwtich bwywn a chrwli le sien horsbio. Sé gôn na han landi agus Patrick, agus had de clachge na hu in jolan agus doi yn oprach sy vigach go hiwn mile blionna dash tra ans na meana gusin.
We were the engineers, we were the metallurgists, we were the people that would take a pile of ready brown dirt and turn it into an axe.
Joiners, stonemasons, they all come to the blacksmith to make the tools, but if the blacksmith wants a tool, he's got to make it himself.
We'll start off with a piece of stock. Like in this case, he's making just a small utility knife. So take this into the fire and onto the bellows, and you will see that it's getting hotter. You're seeing embers start to come through. This would have been done by the youngest apprentice, the one that didn't really know enough to be left on his own, so he would get the pleasure of pumping the bellows.
Leis vetelche de hissige go teach corrid míle agus 300 Celsius so rin gaibh cume go horstéad.
We're just hitting it, but it's not just a matter of smashing it with the hammer. We hit it in a kind of pushing motion. We shape it that way. And then from there, it's sharpening, grinding, polishing.
Be yn goa fertje na fydd bechutrimige sa vala.
Any metal work you needed would have been done by the smith, be it a lock, a hinge, a latch. Things like the nails, they would have made lots of these. Your young apprentices would have been practicing their skills and learning them making nails. Because all the skills you need to make a nail, you need to make everything else. This is the base work.
And so there would have been people here who would have been completely covered in charcoal, singed eyebrows, burnt hands, and all of that would be happening here. And so I think that's something that actually archaeology is really developing, thinking about the individual people who would have worked in these probably awful conditions, in these very, very, very hot environments. I mean, a monastery would be fairly self-contained, so it would have people who worked wood, who worked metal, and stonework. So, you'd need a lot of different trades. So when they were building it, you would need people who were involved in the structural elements, making roofs and walls. So, I mean, it's almost like a village that, they would have grown their own crops and have their own animals as well, so you'd have had to have people to look after them and garden and things as well. And then within the monastery, once you got going, you've got things like if there was vellum working and bookmaking there, you'd need workshops for that.
Dan scoile yn iwsichtje, maar na manich skrif leor jed, van doipehe is een opad achgesen tureterialchtje.
Oh, what's your name?
Robbie.
Let's see if we can get you a fun picture. A nice one with a bird on it.
Yeah.
Would that be nice?
Oh, that's a nice
that one. Okay. Well,
right, well,
put the letters on first.
Dan iddi fi'n anach skrifi son lichyd blionna. Bi skrifi Texas yn dois y fad ag awn na manaching.
I'd say it's more an obsession than a hobby. Once you really get into it, it's so fascinating to do. And I specialise in the early Christian scripts as well.
Oh, that's nice.
There we go.
Y Larach canon yn edrialchtje had je for stylig yn skrifi an y leor jed.
And most people just think medieval writing is this, they don't even notice that there's a big difference, but there are differences. I was showing somebody earlier on Like for instance, if I'm doing this top one, the letter R is very short and it's like that. If you're doing normal English vernacular minuscules, it's like that. But the Irish one, the R is like this. So it's very different and I love it. And the differences really interest me as well.
Ha sóraite a dán go bhfuil leabhar it in Irish, agus go bhfuil corm ag a phobal éici.
Oh, absolutely fabulous, isn't it? Absolutely fabulous. The history. And what surprises me is how little people know about our own history. You know, and the Book of Dheir is just charming. It's just it's completely unique in the way it's drawn. It's very naive, but there's an innocence to it, and there's a joyful innocence. I just think it's just so charming. Love it. That's an R, but that's an R that they used to write long, long ago, when they were writing the Book of Dheir.
Channe scríbe go bhain a hanan leabhar dhéad, iad mór an gúleachan a rúta sin canscoladan sailsechu. Sin Gilibh tainte a gúta go bhí ruchgacha slí a chríost tra bheitthe I miscile.
There are 8 full-page pictures in the manuscript, and some of them are drawn freehand. Some manuscripts in great gospel books, you'll sometimes get someone does the text, the script, and someone else does the art. But this, the same person is doing the text and the decoration, the pictures. That means that the conception of the book has involved art. So visually, it would have an impact, and the picture would relate to the text on the right.
Na dhanna críostaíach go galapa an toiseach be láitin canan a bhípil, agus bhí go bhórchuid a tuigsin an deachasc tra mínachan an sacarst agus na manach, seach tra na fachlan héin.
Early on, people might have said, oh, they're quite alien, they're quite primitive, but actually there is no way these could be described as doodles. It's actually very visually very affecting, it has an impact, and it's very beautiful and very detailed.
Fad na clói chai mór an stúhan na Larach fá dhifalíontin an an neachtarí na scídasa. Hat is altain dói behegúne in go dioprach agus mar a bhásachiad. Agus bhí de chula lá cormanúr stúhan Larach.
There are at least 5 buildings just in this little area here. The problem is that the finds that we've had so far are all in the soil covering these features that's been ploughed over years. So we've had some lovely medieval finds, but nothing that actually shouts monastery or early medieval yet. It's just the dates from the features that are giving us those dates so far. And so we're banking strongly on finding the pattern of these buildings, working out which ones are contemporary, and therefore by the shape and nature of the actual structures in the ground as to whether it's the monastery or not. We do get excited, and this is really a very, very promising area.
San ansa chearn seo an a túil puiste chai an Larach nó de bhad de clóch an seo an a 2016. En jöin iad an bra ceann lá tra sna meán úsin, and Gerard am díadach misteach an leor is scríbeh.
Until we get the stone off, we won't have a better idea of the earlier structure. So the post hole that we excavated, which was dated to around 660 to 770, or that sort of period, we've now uncovered it with the other post holes that we had in 2017 and 18. And I mean, that does look like an ark, but we would need to find more really to see the structure.
Ag ceannile an trainse ha allanich archaeologists alha an glasgows op Rhein iad a bhí rúscún na srehin.
Yeah, so from the dot to here.
Yeah. Oh
yeah.
yeah.
30.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And then I'll
have something.
come down here.
Okay.
I mean, when I'm setting up a dig, I always advertise in the different universities because it's great to have the archaeology students coming along to the dig, and it's really good for them because they need to get out to have experience, rather than just being in the lab or the classroom, and so they really enjoy it.
Het is sprúliach a Larach agus stocha go ré na ha fóa an rud is loch for a chael Larach go rigour seo.
Yeah, I feel like this is the deepest feature that you guys found on this dig so far. Basically, when you're trying to look at the feature and excavate the feature, you would want to follow down this natural layer. So as you can see, but it's quite nicely coming down. So you would just follow the natural down. And I know this is really muddy, but this is actually the bottom of the ditch. And if you scrape it a little bit, you can see pebbles and all sorts of tiny rocks that would indicate that at some point it was filled with water.
A seo sáirite ar a fisacin gon ra manachinin go tríchgad an gcóirsteach le G Guisce is an cannar monastic valum.
One of the things that early medieval monasteries are expected to have is a boundary ditch, and it's a sort of marker between the sacred and the profane. So inside that boundary, you are within the monastery. But in fact, it's not that common for a brand new ditch to be dug. Very often, these sites inherit something that's earlier in the landscape, and they appropriate it, and then it becomes the boundary. So it's not necessarily an act of new definition.
Do you have any finds from it?
Next to the ditch we found some medieval glass which we can get dated by an expert, and we've got a lot of charcoal as well which we can get dated as well, so dates should come back in a bit and we can figure out how old the ditch is.
Gus ceann lá a chuir na stúhan a hat Larach, fé mar sampl na chud go opbhfuil laman, par an bead a clachca dóioprach leis an cannar radiocarbon dating. With an prósa seo grún víasan. Anscach ní bio ha element leis an cannar carbon céir tíag a ha bican radio bio. Le bhí tás na ha an radiach seo lóg futar ceann lá a hás.
Carbon dating looks at the amount of carbon-14 in something which has been living but which has died. And so the amount of carbon-14 stops being created once the thing dies. So anything that's been alive, you can radiocarbon date. And that's incredibly important for us because a lot of things that we find, bone, wood, have been alive, and therefore we can radiocarbon date. We want to be careful at the moment what we say, but we need to see what shape it is. A monastic ditch would generally be circular in some way, so oval, sub-oval, or odd shapes, but they have rounded corners. And so if we can work out where these two fragments of ditch lead us, then we might have a better idea of whether it might be monastic. I would say that it definitely increases the possibility of it being, because that's one of the things we know would have had a ditch, and so therefore it definitely slightly increases the possibility.
Can you chulrút a haar a Larach an Larach seo úd? Chai cútsiú an Larach an na gá clóichin there. Be inrút a chai Larach an tre chlachan seo. Se premala a Larach an na dávílas a hochtíag. A colas staranid agus haith chiliag feichen gav barach oilshachu.
The trench I dug last night was this not quite square here. It started off as a square, just to see if there was continuation here, and well, you could see. I had tears of joy actually, of excitement when I found it again.
And path is important, that it goes from somewhere to somewhere, and we want to try and work out where that is. And the bedding layer underneath it, sort of sandy layer, we had dated by radiocarbon dating to 1041 to 1211 AD, so within the monastic period.
It's obviously going back this way, but it's a slight angle to what we originally might have thought. And so we're now extending this trench at the back to see if we can find it further down.
Within a monastic complex, there would have been all sorts of liturgical, processional activities that were undertaken. So when you were worshipping, it wasn't necessarily static in a church, but the monastic community would have perambulated. They would have walked around the monastic complex, visiting various holy stations. Now, that might have been going to another chapel site, it might have been going to a holy well. So that level of investment and planning is quite important in an early Christian site.
For me, the exciting thing is that it just continues, and I guess, where does it go to? That's what I would love to know, is just, well, I would just love to follow it and see where it goes.
An borin seo a bhí na lia a bheit le seachad nó dheagan I lientain chun a bhanaching.
Yeah. Ah! She's found it!
Seriously? I don't know, but it's a big
It looks awfully like it.
Wow, what do you think? Definitely? Well, it's two big stones next to each other, so hopefully it's in about the right place.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right there. Fantastic.
That's amazing.
When you start finding things, you get such a buzz from it. It's great.
Oh my goodness, look at this. Wow. Oh my goodness. So, I mean, this is presumably the continuation of the path which we have already dated to the bedding material to around about 1000 AD. But where going to and from in 1000 AD, we're not sure.
Yeah, it's just amazing.
Chain I haran yn Gaelic an y leor iedd ysgrifig le cognar jiffer fanach rhain yn blionachan. Y Larach gyda fi sych y Gaelic na halapa gy cyn sy'n iarhua biad cwtioch gytorst imrig iddyn dwolachus eidanoch achga. Le sien, bi siaw Gaelic na heddon a nochga coro oedd.
There's a single folio that's been inserted into the manuscript. It's in Latin, but it's a shortened mass ritual for someone who's very ill. So this is where this manuscript has been taken to visit someone who's ill and give them the sacrament. And in it, there is a tiny instruction which says, "Here, give him the sacrifice," meaning the Eucharist. And that's in Irish Gaelic. And there's also, at the end of the manuscript, at the very end of the main text, which is otherwise all in Latin, and it's Gospels, there's a thing called a scribal colophon. So that means it's where the scribe stops writing the main text and speaks in their own voice and addresses the reader. This occurs in a couple of Irish manuscripts as well. So what it tells us is that the scribe knew about practices in Ireland. And in this case, it's whoever reads this splendid little book, if they could make a prayer for the soul of the wretch who penned it.
Am sicil na Scottish Gaelic agus yn písin farvel skrif a skrivig an sy'n gwych gehein mar gebych. Tína falla von gw bekin is political chuisnes nes farmel. Am sicil sin diolch mas onitjes chan eich cwysyn morin von aumsin agus ha torst rutkin gyma persente gan jor, ferach gyma persente gan jor. Agus how diolch ferach i mar gwyl cwtgyn von lyn sin y brian rut awn sa chan ac yn tein cwtioch sach yn ha gyma onitje.
Se lónas de lahan agus a bharach gyda fi strí yn loin jawndacan fas fat yn iwchyd no da fad fallaf han archaeologist in a strí leis yn jes cwtioch.
I mean, I've done digs in Cyprus and I feel like it's just hitting that point of like, whew, this is maybe a bit too low. And it's so dusty as well, like if you sneeze, it's just a dust cloud.
It's too hot to dig. Right.
Mar a hanna seachgan yn y dol seachad, ta y nŵra nochga gus cwtioch y hors seachad y sgribig tron talachar.
And it's such a very interesting site in a larger Scottish context. Having the first written Gaelic, I think is really special.
Agus stocha gyfel Laura idd fwsglagain idd yn jig.
So this is the initial section that was placed through the ditch and wall. Context is just a very, very simple cut with quite steep edges, and this is what we had expected to continue upstream.
Waar een dag is genoeg een darne treintje in een lijfjes, barach gen jeeg, stoche aan een boe. Ach, gaan je zinnen tachers.
So you can see the trench that I started with just came up to here. So this is the same ditch and the same wall. And I was expecting to find a similar section to the trench below me, in that the ditch would continue. But instead I've found a drain that's diverting water into the ditch. It's running slightly downhill, and water would have come out here and pulled into the ditch.
Ach a seo a harcha go túr mar a bhar a mínacha curson a bhí gata clachca na ddíca. Ag le u glochan go raibh bhalam a hawn.
Now, we obviously got excited when we found a ditch because we might have thought that was to do with the Valum ditch, so surrounding a monastery. But as soon as we realised it was more to do with water management, we were then talking about a building which has either had a water wheel, or just needed an awful lot of water near it or in it for whatever was happening within that building.
The thing is with our ditch, it's not a Valum, and it was very frustrating that we found that. Basically, usually we would expect that, but the problem is we're not entirely sure what a monastery of this period and type would look like. So we are sort of looking for a needle in a haystack, but the haystack's made of needles, and we forgot what the original needle looked like, so it's very, very difficult.
En je nesje kent getuigesag gun Larach a vanachin.
It's very difficult because there just isn't enough really to say, and we're not getting features that are and finds that are suggesting it is the monastery. And so maybe it's just that this is not it, or that everything's, whatever they had here has gone. But you would suspect that you would find some monastic or early medieval finds if they had been here. So I suppose if you pushed me, I would say this probably hasn't been the monastery.
We're still hoping that we'll find something here, I mean, we've got 3 days to go after today. So we're still hoping. I think it's here, but that's just me. And it doesn't, I do think it's here.
You get a feeling in your bones, it's like a sixth sense. You know that it's important, and every tiny macroscopic detail matters, and you have to be so diligent and so thorough. And I can understand people working into the evenings because they just want to find out more.
Ach am futig forstan a bhí gaharcha I dhíist.
It's a posthole, we believe, and it seems to be quite exciting because it's going down quite deep. So I just put in my string, halved it, and then just started going down, and then teased out to the sides, and I could really feel where the edges were. And at the moment it's like, well, what is going to be at the bottom of it? Who knows? It could be something really interesting.
So we have this thing, and I like to call it the curse of the last day. And it's basically on the last day or the last week of your excavation, you'll always find something really cool.
Yeah, I'm wondering if that's the bottom, because I thought, there's that gravelly layer that goes.
It is.
And
That's the bottom.
I think that's the bottom.
Oh, lovely. That's nice, isn't it?
En je ach 3 ládigol agus ha plipútáchas in nachgag zat dit barach tuil pushte Larach.
I mean, the postholes are significant, that we don't yet know what date they are, but that they could be part of the monastic structures. And so, they're very important to find. And this is exactly the sort of evidence that we were looking for.
Tidy up your loose.
Díadach mar an dáisechan mú Larach na manachin, ha an tlia I gaf leor iedd vagak e Njarhua, gus an Dheiranic e Cambridge, mar táisechan cúteach.
So the provenance of the manuscript, essentially what happened after it was created, we know it's there from 1130 to 1150 in the 12th century. In 1219, William Comyn, who is the local lord, he found this Cistercian abbey of Dheir. We know that that Cistercian abbey held some of the lands of the original monastery of Dheir. And for that reason, they would have kept the Book of Dheir. It would have been very valuable to them, again, as proof of their landholding.
Ach an dia líon diaag bheith aontain na tachasta san is orstathe an na neachtarí hasin, cúteach go riabeag trálape. Be sin scuúla na manachainean dí líon rí jaunric an tochgah. Ba manachainean na fiagan na riach gan cthacha, gus cocag an rui leis an Spáin a bhúneacha.
The awful stories of what happened to manuscripts at the dissolution of the monasteries. Henry VIII sent his agent round, and he was only interested in manuscripts relating to his issues with the church. And many, many manuscripts were not valued and they were lost.
Man am seo chur scial I leor héad. Gyda fa dŵl gan roi an sa lapage, chur is camera huad sia sa hasin.
Hafis ac un gynjach yn leor hors gan leor lawn an Cambridge, Olhai Cambridge, fo ri siarad a hwn, hwce yn crynigig ec Bishop John Moore gan leor lawn an an siachdi coedia cam ysmynigig. Agus, chael ffysig ding sy'n bi cemer giroch a hwre gan crynigig sy'n. Hafis ac un gwyl ding yn y gawn ec yn rôl leor eter sy'n. A chael sy'n cynjoch cemer hwre y fi a operain siasgu Cambridge. Ach ha tor biach ganawn y leid gynjach a gotch tron ys doch yn Wars of Independence. No gynjach a reich glis gyda written ar le luach fod o fewn y manuscripts mar y leid fioin illuminated.
Isaac yn gynro leor iedd iddo horsgw leor lan Olhai Cambridge an y siachci y diag agus y cwg diag. Ach fiws yn lwr sy'n ha dwgad fanier cho cwtramach sa fae.
They didn't recognise it. You would have to have known what Gaelic language was. You'd have to have been interested in the language of Britain and Ireland. So it's only 1860 that the Gaelic notes were really discovered in the manuscript due to Henry Bradshaw, who was the librarian of the University Library in Cambridge.
Agus yn yw'n am ysgrifennu fwyl o'r gyda cho sonach ys y fa, dy coeted gro card differential o manuscripts tradition te wat yn dwrish. Bag ma bec, liorg ma bec, Follish Ocrator Opera Dolstiach an agus Nottican yn y töfyn fa gyda fa Gospels an yn Latin fa Nottican an sa Gaelic agus sinrwyd fa y foich at fa Cardiffriches nach rot yn dwrish agus ham sy'n gyda foich at nyrsin cho cwtrwach sa fa agus cho sonich sa fa gro siartien gan chrynig ag achge.
An an siarach gobrain, sio yn lami ydig gen chlwch. Had no diag tŵl push to Larach with fat.
It's looking good, everybody.
It's on Ali agus yn skipeiche, ha an clwch agus yn claru siachad.
Premila was up in the night till dark planning. So she's got this amazing plan which she can show you here. So that's one section of it. So which bit is that, Premila? From the edge there. So that's the edge of the trench from 2018 along to here, along to the edge of there.
It's really difficult to stop once you start. Really difficult.
Eich star an Premila a chwyd ddysyn ianish a ha siad as. Agus féman ha shen ysgrwde gyffaicaloch.
So I think we've got now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 more post holes than we had when we started this dig, which doesn't seem many, but 3 of them are of very specific type, which is very deep. So 30 centimetres diameter for the post and 35 centimetres deep. So they're really, 3 of them probably related. And we've drawn a plan this morning of them all together, but we can't really see a pattern, and it's because we've lost a lot of them. So what we need to do now is to get dates for those. So a lot of them have got charcoal in. We'll get dates for those and then we'll be able to piece the story together in post-excavation. To direct a dig with all these people is very hard work. So there's a mixture, you know, I'm sad that people are leaving. I mean, we dug a huge amount of material up. We did a lot of features. And so, yes, I mean, it is a huge achievement to have excavated that amount. Yeah, no, we're proud to have done that, you know, as a team. 1, 2, 3.
Take care, everybody.
Bye. Bye-bye, all the best.
It is so heartbreaking to have a dig finish. You're obviously very physically exhausted, but it is very, very hard because these are people that you've spent, you know, not like a typical work day, but basically a day with every day for 6 weeks, 2 months, or whatever. And they become a little bit like your family. We would not have a dig without our volunteers. They are, apart from the archaeology, the most important thing for our dig. They are absolutely fantastic, and I think this sense of community that we have through our volunteers is just incredible. Got that on film now.
Séan teach go láide nniuchad a han anna 2028.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the Lord Provost of the City of Aberdeen, David Cameron.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome. What is a more fitting exhibition for us to have here but the return of the Book of Dheir? It's the first time in nearly 1,000 years.
I walked in here and I came in quite early, so I was nobody in the room except the chap that let me in and me, and I just went, oh.
People have a very clear response to this text, and that's so interesting because that's the other fear, is not just that people don't see it, but people don't care. People care so deeply and so much about this text.
We'll come and have a look and see what you think. It really is marvellous, isn't it?
Isn't it lovely? Leabhar.
Leabhar, very good indeed.
Harm eisiau dŵr eisiau fi chobek sa bai, fa me'r klein sy'n gro bec, ach na hwnnw mi chanya giro chanya eisiau yn biach gyfach ymer, mae'r manuscript eisiau, ar fa fatnas lygu, ag han ysgol ti'n gwneud ior, mae'r dairi yn yrtgyn sy'n yn sors yr yrtgyn mis merich i gyd, na hwnnw mi ag ys gaich gyn le notig yn Gaelic awn, ys Gaelic na halapa chofater ash.
The condition of the book, it really is just exquisite. And yeah, it's quite moving seeing such a beautiful book brought back to the North East, having been away for so long.
Hide my back.
Hallo Carla Guram Kafenki na Lima Hulanin.
Farkum Cross.
Oh, it's lovely. It is.
It is, it's amazing.
Just imagine doing that prayer for you.
Oh,
Can't believe it.
beautiful, beautiful script. Yeah.
I'm lost for words, I'm sorry. I just think it's wonderful. I really do.
Mar a hachras leis a bhórchuidste Larach clách, hat iad yn lion agus teach a dhíist agus iad yn tilig mar a bha, gus yn biad iad yn gléag gysáfalte, agus chat iad fata gus yn bín látar a gáil hadis.
How are you feeling, Ali? Tell me about it.
It's really weird, isn't it?
It's very strange.
You can see where the trench was because the weeds are different growing on the where the...
I know what you mean, but I'm struggling because you made me come in here and have a look and point at where the post holes would be.
Yeah, well, they were over here, and so I can't walk in there at the moment with my gammy knees. And you are younger than me, so...
I could go back. I may go back, I'll think about it.
But yeah, no, so the post holes were in here, weren't they?
Fydd miasan is on y samplan van y twyl pwysti iarafig agus cawn la chydora.
This horrible, both a nice sense of anticipation and waiting as you try and figure out whether you found what you think you found, and that painful waiting for all the dates. Oh my gosh, terrible months. And then Ali, ever so coyly, just sends them by email, sends me a little Facebook message. She's like, you should check the dates. And then I open it up and it's unbelievable. And I have to check with her several times because I don't believe what she's just sent me could possibly be true.
And we're starting to get dates, for example, 940 to 1020 AD, 952 to 1024 AD. And then a group of dates, 1030 to 1160, 1080 to 1154, all within this period which we would be expecting for a monastery.
Yeah, that's a nice 10th to 11th century date as well. It's perfect, it's bang on, isn't it? Yes, that's really exciting. I would say 10 out of 10, yeah, I think jackpot, yeah.
And immediately I went through and told my partner, oh my goodness, we found the monastery.
It seems quite like outrageous and audacious. I'm able to sit here and be like, yes, we found the monastery. Can you imagine?
A lot of the rest of the field has been very disturbed, but we were able to, put a trench right on the area where we found these early medieval features, which is amazing.
Han y cyn la jarafig gro 3 iddyn jegniaf iddyn Larach sio. Y farach iddyn tawl pwys chai Larach an y 2016 chai ferilla van y lyn y Larach.
2 post holes don't make a structure, but that having them from this very early period, is incredibly exciting.
Get na chai valem manach alavan, va cawn la iddyn gícushke tra sna mian ninchin, chimichil iddyn nunaum the post machalameg.
This ditch is amazing, probably cut in the 7th to 8th century, and then infilled in the, in the 8th century, which was much, much earlier than we thought it was going to be.
Ach ben júnig is smá, and lot of just stu ekan ra cawn la ans na linchin taroche, Eiter yn jichif agus yn darna lín diog. Na misc va grúm tŵl pwysht agus yn staran y chwydich premela y Larach.
And that was the sort of jaw-dropping moment, because although the remains are not well preserved, in fact they're fairly poorly preserved, that was the weight of evidence that suggested that this is the monastery.
En rwyd ydy fel sy'n ynnes jefinge gyn roch coersnach manachal trang y sio ac yw'n corydd 1000 bliona, ydol ma chwrst yn behe laial. Chosichat hadau sydd sli y laichyd, stocha is on torg y chrynachig, no is on wrni. Agus, an tocolach yn batic yn ma chwrst yn dhartio sio, Skrif manich fachglan idd imol lior sosklan latchen fachglan an y Gaelic na halabe. Jarinjan na hiet jöin sin Georgia y vadig yn 1000 blion eile.
This book is incredibly important, and the survival of this book is incredibly important.
Chanor seo mar eisimpleir agus fiúnis go bhfuil Gaelic ar a bhíann agus chofatar as cuideach mar a chiad eisimpleir hacín san nearthú in áte san níir a sin deoch go meas ánach temas múnach.